let's talk about how you deal with a multi-POV book. Ordinarily, dual POVs, so they're quite common, let's say, in romance. It's not uncommon to have two POVs. I'm thinking about my favourite romance, which of course is Pride and Prejudice. Although that's mostly from her POV, it's very interesting. The BBC adaptation with Colin Firth obviously is my favourite. And you see a lot more of what in the book is revealed later as he was in love with you all the time. And of course you get hints of that in the serialized version because it's so visual. But this is, two POVs. There are almost always, when you say to writers, oh, it's pretty difficult to do multiple POVs, they say, what about George Martin? You're like, well, are you George Martin? And the answer is you're not, because you're not. But also the answer is he doesn't know how to track his characters. He has got an army of people helping him, telling him who's who and what threads are left dangling. He is a very, very intuitive writer. I've talked about this before, why, although I haven't seen any of it, so don't tell me. But of course, I read some craft articles about it. But one of the theories about why the ending was not satisfying to viewers was because he hadn't finished the final book, and he has this character-driven narrative. So the stories come from the drive and ambition and flaw of these characters. And when it came to filming the final season, there were a bunch of people in a room, writers in a room, who were trying to mechanically wrap everything up and tie it up. And so it wasn't driven from the same kind of narrative technique. But mostly, sorry, that was a bit aside, wasn't it? Mostly, we don't have that level of craft to pull off a 50 POV kind of book. Doing one is hard enough. Doing two is really hard. And here we are writing 4 and 5 POV books, which is incredibly difficult to pull off. We've only got the first chapters in, and I'm starting to see things that I want to nip in the bud before we get too far at all. If you read Team Cockroaches' opening chapters, you'll see that 2 of our main POV characters already knew each other back in university. They have a link and they're in touch because of this crisis, because one of the characters is an entomologist and the other one has this bug apocalypse that has just happened in front of her. The third POV character that we see is going to be linked to them because she holds the cure. So she is linked into this virus that is being released, and she holds the cure to it. So everybody is connected to the apocalypse that we're experiencing through either their relationships to each other or the search for the cure. And so they're going to have to come together in these books. And I'm seeing in some of your chapters that you're starting, this is a bit forward of me because I haven't seen your plans yet for how books are going to play out. But as you're doing your planning, I want this in the back of your head, that you want this coming together of your narrative threads. It is very rewarding for a reader. They expect it, they want it, and if you don't deliver it, you're gonna get hammered. Because if your characters are not somehow related to one each other, that's English. It's totally English. Actually, English is kind of my second language because I went to kindergarten before I went to an English school. So I speak German like a kindergartner. So what are the different ways in a multi-POV narrative that you can tie people together? In our instance, we are tied around the sickness that is being released. They are all tied to that goal. There are other kinds of ways that you can do it. In my series, which I'm wrapping up, Melt, everything is centered around this family. And we go quite wide because her neighborhood is quite wide. And my main character, Alice Everly, has got a wide footprint. But everything is around this family, and it will all come back to this family. I hope I'm going to knock their socks off. I hope they don't see it coming. But they might. Who knows? And so I want that in your mind. How are you going to get this to come together? In The Stand, you've got this huge footprint of who is where in the country and what they're struggling with, and a lot of them aren't related at all, but they have either got the voice of Mother Abigail calling them to the safe place and calling them to the light, or they've got the voice of the devil calling them inexorably to I say that word so often and I get it wrong every single time, but I know what it means. So there, that's my excuse. So we've got this light and dark thing going on, where they're either being called by one message or called by another, but it's the call that is the unifying thing that holds everything together. So the readers are tracking, well, which side are you on? They're not necessarily tracking, does your story all come together in the same place? Does it come together around the same issue? Does it come together around a family? That comes together around a call, a supernatural call, which we won't have in our books. So we've got same goal, family, a message that is bringing people together. And I'm thinking about how relatively early on in your series, I'm looking at the time, you can think about how to start threading these things together, because some of them are quite disparate, right? One of the things that I'm seeing pop up, which is extremely useful, is the newscaster. So a newscaster can be broadcasting in different places the same-ish message. It never is going to be the same, because your reader, even if your characters don't know something and they're learning it for the first time on the page, the readers never want to hear the same thing twice. So if, for example, you're using a newscaster to thread this story together across the world, you want to make sure that your newscaster is saying something different each time they broadcast, so that your readers don't get bored, so they're engaged. Because if you say the same thing, they're going to switch off. They absolutely will switch off. I know, because I've experimented with it and it failed. So other kinds of narrative frameworks that you can have a specialist who is concentrated on the unfolding disaster, who gives us, with a story, they have to have a story going on, so they have to have goals of their own, but you can thread together through 6 books how all these different people are connected to this same story through some kind of a specialist, whether or not they're with NOAA, or they're with the CDC, or they're with, I mean, we don't go to NASA because we're not that kind of storytelling, but you can have specialists who know what's going on and help give us that kind of narrative backbone, so that everyone is related to the same thing that's going on. Not just that there is this big apocalypse going on that they are all reacting to, but that there's a central backbone that unites all of them in some kind of way. I'm not seeing that in everybody's planning, and I need to see it. It isn't something that we've talked about before, because we are, with some grace, I hope, we are learning this together, but I really need to see how you're going to either pull these threads together, how these characters are going to interact with each other, or how the spine holds it up so that we understand that they are all linked to the final goal. All right, I hope that wasn't too confusing. You can shoot me notes and tell me whatever you want to tell me, and I will probably be back tomorrow. What fun, hey? Goodbye, doom scribblers.